We're going to get started here. New sermon series today called Pastor's Perspective. So what I did is I spent the whole month of August collecting those little 3x5 cards from you with questions you might have. And I went through all those questions and I listed them all out. And I just wanted to give you one little quick update about it. A few of those questions are questions that I don't think I could put together a whole sermon about. So what I'm going to do with certain questions that were asked is I'm going to put them on my blog. Okay, I've got a blog on our website, and you can go check that out at our website if you want. But if it's one where I don't feel like I can create a whole sermon because it would take me maybe 5 minutes to answer, maybe 10, I'm going to answer them by that way. I'll let you know when that happens, though, and I'll keep you aware of what's going on, and you can go to the website and read the blog on it. But today we're going to start with this pastor's perspective and the questions we're dealing with. So let me start with a word of prayer, and then we'll get started. Father, I pray that I will do this question justice, Lord. I thank you for the heart behind the question, Lord. I know it's a question that many of us ask, and it's one that we probably will wrestle with for our entire lives. But yet your word does give light to how to think about this question, Father. And I pray that you will let that light be clear to us today as we go through this. Lord, I pray that you'll take the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart, and that you will make them acceptable in your sight. I pray that you will bless this time and draw us all nearer to you through this message, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, so I thought about this question, and it made me think about my grandmother. So let me tell you about my grandmother. I wrote up a little something about her. My grandmother on my mom's side was the sweetest, kindest, most loving person that I have ever met. As children, me and my sister felt that she could do no wrong. The warmth of her love toward us was truly a blessing of our childhood. I mean, folks, truly it was. It was a blessing to have my grandma. In fact, many of my cousins had taken to calling her sweet grandma. They had another grandma on the other side that, I'm not saying she was bad, but she wasn't sweet grandma. This grandma was sweet grandma, okay?
Tina said she was salty grandma.
She was what?
Salty grandma.
Yeah, maybe she was salty grandma. That's true. That could be true. I don't know. I don't know for sure because I didn't really know the grandma on that side of my cousins and stuff. But anyway, when grandma got older, though, her health deteriorated. She eventually came to live in my mother's house. Several years went by. Over those years, she went from helping cook the food around the house and helping out with various things to basically just sitting in a chair and hardly speaking. One time I found her standing on the front step at about 3 a.m. I went to her and I asked her what she was doing. She said she was waiting for my grandfather to get home. He'd been dead for over 10 years by that point. Heart disease and some form of dementia took its toll on Grandma. It just doesn't seem fair, does it? It just doesn't seem fair. Someone as sweet and kind as Grandma slowly drifts into a shell of her former self, and yet some people her age who aren't half as good are healthy well into their later years. So today's question was given to me on August 4th. It's a question that is on a lot of people's minds, and I think it's probably something you've thought about before. Why do bad things happen to good people in this world? Why do bad things happen to good people? I suspect that the reverse of this question also nags at us. Why do good things happen to bad people? A single mother struggles and scrapes, working 2 jobs to provide for her children. She prays and goes to church faithfully. At the same time, a drug-dealing pimp lives a life of luxury, enjoying every human pleasure under the sun. Is the single mother being punished for her godly efforts? Is the drug dealer being rewarded for his wickedness? We all have seen tragic paradoxes like these. We may even wonder what is the point of doing good at all. The evil are often rewarded while the good suffer. So in responding to this question, why do bad things happen to good people, I'd like to offer 3 biblical points of contact to consider this morning, okay? It's on your outline, but 3 biblical points of contact. The first point is the basic answer to the question. The second 2 points are sort of corollaries that come off of that, all right? So, why do bad things happen to good people? Number one, the fact of a broken world. The fact of a broken world. Sin is like a pandemic that began with Adam and has spread to everything. Everything. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take Romans 5:12 through 21, and I'm just going to hit a couple highlights in the passage. There's something a lot bigger going on in the whole passage, but he makes repeated references to what sin has done, the sin of Adam particularly, what it has done to humanity. So Romans 5 verse 12 says, "Therefore, just as through one man sin entered into the world, and death through sin, and so death spread to all mankind because all sinned." Kind of an awkward sentence, but he's talking about how Adam sinned, and that created this pandemic, if you will, of death and sin that spread to all of humanity from that first sin. If you go down to verse 15, it says, "For if by the offense of the one, the many died." So the offense of Adam, the one, caused the many to now experience death as well. Verse 16, he says, "For on the one hand, the judgment arose from one offense, resulting in condemnation." So humankind is under condemnation because we are under that sin of Adam that originated with him. Verse 17 says, "For if by the offense of the one, death reigned through the one." So again, the offense of Adam meant that death reigned through him over the entire human race. Verse 18, "So then, as through one offense, the result was condemnation to all mankind." One sin that Adam committed put all mankind under condemnation. And then verse 19, "For as through the one man's disobedience, the many were made sinners." So we see that this sin that Adam committed, it has infected the whole human race. We are all infected with it. We are all sinners, and we find ourselves in need of the forgiveness that is available only through Christ. Romans 8:19 through 23 is very interesting too. It sort of adds to the bad news about our sin here. It says, "For the eagerly awaiting creation waits for the revealing of the sons and daughters of God. For the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will also be set free from its slavery to corruption into the freedom of the glory of the children of God." So, remember I told you a few weeks ago that Paul, the writer of this text we're reading, loved to these long sentences. So this is one of those long sentences here. But the gist of what he's saying here is that the creation itself has been affected by sin. The created world, not just the human race, but the creation itself, the universe, the world, the planet has been affected by the curse of sin. He goes on and says, "For we know that the whole creation groans and suffers the pains of childbirth together until now. And not only that, but also we ourselves, having the first fruits of the Spirit, even we ourselves groan within ourselves, waiting eagerly for our adoption as sons and daughters, the redemption of our body." He's talking about the resurrection. Isn't that true? Don't you groan inside your own mind and heart sometimes? You sort of like, wow, this is a struggle. This life is a struggle. And you'll feel more and more of it as you grow older, as many of you have experienced. You grow older and you feel it even more. You're like, I'm groaning inside myself. This is a struggle. This is hard. Paul is saying that even the creation itself feels that struggle, that somehow, some way, that sin that entered into existence has sort of corrupted and messed up everything. Not just human beings, but even beyond that. So several statements in these passages indicate that the world we live in is broken by sin. One effect of this is that injustice occurs. Even the good are not spared from the effects. So it's like a pandemic that affects everyone. Now, it's important to note that not every bad circumstance for a person is a result of a specific sin that person committed, okay? It's not that, grandma getting old and getting dementia was not a result of any specific sin she committed. It was just a result of the fact that she lived in a broken world. She lived in a broken creation. Now, it could be the case sometimes where someone's decision actually does affect them, okay? I mean, you see someone who has ruined their lives with drugs and stuff like that. That's a decision they made. So that could be the case, but it's not always the case. I want you to consider 3 factors that help us to get at this. The first factor is human volition. Human volition. In other words, human beings have a will. The human will is not incapable of any good, but it is corrupted by sin. Therefore, humans often choose evil. Some bad circumstances are the result of someone else's choice to do evil. So some bad circumstances happen because someone else chose to do evil. God has allowed human volition. We know that that is true. So sometimes bad things happen to good people because bad people choose evil. I saw a video one time. It was actually being shown on a news show. And it was an expose of this guy that worked in a nursing home that they caught on a hidden camera, and he was abusing the patients in the nursing home. And he was laughing about it. He was having a good old time causing pain to these people that were, debilitated. They were old and they were in a nursing home. And I'll tell you, when I saw that, my first gut response was I wanted to jump out of my seat and put my hands through the television and strangle this guy. It was just crazy, but that's evil. I don't know what was driving him except to say it must have been evil in his heart that just totally took over to do something so evil. Sometimes good people suffer in this world because bad people choose evil. So human volition. A second factor is something we've already touched on, a cursed creation. Cursed creation. We've just read about this in Romans 8:18 through 23. Paul envisions the entire creation, not just the human race, as suffering the pains of sin. Earthquakes, tornadoes, hurricanes are an example of the result. Sin has brought defects to the creation. So a hurricane may take hundreds or thousands of lives without any regard to someone's goodness. Remember when Hurricane Katrina hit? I remember hearing some people speculating that, that hurricane hit, and it devastated New Orleans, and people suffered, a lot of people died, and it was a tragic event. It really was. But I remember hearing people sort of speculate, saying, well, maybe that was God's punishment on them because they're doing so much evil. I find 2 problems with that idea, okay? 2 problems with that idea. First of all, there were plenty of Christians there too. We at the seminary I was going to at the time, we actually allowed the students from New Orleans Baptist Seminary to go a semester or 2. I think they gave them a whole year for free at our seminary so they could continue their education while they cleaned up, because their whole facility got destroyed and flooded and everything. So it doesn't really stand to reason that, well, it was a judgment that because of their sin. The second problem with it is that, sure, there's a lot of sinners in New Orleans. I don't doubt that. But you know what? There's a lot of sinners everywhere. Everywhere you go. Los Angeles, Chicago, New York. And guess what? I hate to tell you, but Mount Jackson and Woodstock and New Market, there's plenty of sinners everywhere. So they didn't do anything more worthy of that storm than anyone else. Rather, it was a product of a broken world, of a creation that isn't functioning properly, where guess what? Tornadoes and earthquakes and hurricanes and things like that happen, and people are destroyed by them. By the way, this cursed creation also explains diseases. Now, some diseases are a direct result of sin. Think STDs. Okay, that's true. But not all. Grandma's dementia was not the result of anything she did. It was just the fact of this is a cursed creation. And we have to understand that. We have to realize this is a broken world. As we just sung about, this is not where we belong, right? It isn't where we belong. It isn't our final destination. But hold that thought, because I'm getting to that. So, human volition, a cursed creation. Then a third factor that we need to factor in is Satan's influence. Satan's influence. Folks, the devil is evil, and the devil is very, very real. He prowls around like a roaring lion seeking someone to devour, 1 Peter 5:8. I think he particularly enjoys punishing a good person. Just think about Job for a minute, if you're familiar with the book of Job. I think that he wants to discredit the way of God. That's his whole thing. He wants to discredit God in any way that he can. So make no mistake, there are spiritual forces at work on the world stage today. Movements like communism, radical Islam have dark spiritual forces behind them. Make no mistake about that. And they have brought pointless misery to many, many people over the years. Unfettered access to abortions is one of Satan's triumphs. Anti-Semitism is a fire that he loves to stoke. Human trafficking, the fentanyl crisis, these are a couple of his masterpieces, folks. And what is the result? Well, a lot of otherwise good people suffer. A lot of otherwise good people suffer for the evil that Satan brings into the hearts of people. Okay, so human beings are sinners by themselves, but understand that Satan is right there stoking that fire, fanning that flame to make it into something totally evil and totally destructive. So he ruins lives. So human volition, a cursed creation and Satan's influence conspire to make this world a very unfair and unjust place, even for people who know God. That's the reality of it. Bad things occur and affect even the most pure among us. It's the fact of a broken world. Now, there's a second point of contact to consider, though. It's not a fun thing to consider, but it really needs to be factored in, especially for this question. I call it the fallacy of human goodness. So we've got, number one, the fact of a broken world, and number two, the fallacy of human goodness. Good is a relative term when it comes to the human being. Now, it's difficult for me to think of Grandma as a sinner, okay? But she was. She certainly was. Each person has been infected with what might be called this sin curse. The result is that we gravitate towards selfishness and away from holiness. From this perspective, bad things don't actually happen to good people. Bad things happen to sinful people. This is not to say that every person deserves the bad that happens to them. We've covered that in a moment ago. But the Bible is very clear that the human race is thoroughly corrupt. We're corrupt. Humanity is corrupt. Think about this. Why did God flood the earth in the days of Noah? Genesis 6:5 tells us. It says, "Then the Lord saw that the wickedness of mankind was great on the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of their hearts was only evil continually." Wow. That's what God saw. So the fall happened, Genesis 3. And by the time you get to Genesis 6, you see what happened. You see the result already there. God looks down on the earth, and the only people he finds that weren't sinless but believed was Noah and his family. Let me read that again. The Lord saw that the wickedness of mankind was great on the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of their hearts was only evil continually. So what happened? The flood. You know the story. Jeremiah 17:9 says, "The heart is more deceitful than all else and is desperately sick. Who can understand it?" Isaiah 64:6 says, "For all of us have become like one who is unclean, and all our righteous deeds are like a filthy garment, and all of us wither like a leaf, and our wrongdoings like the wind take us away." I watch more TV than I should. I'm going to admit that to you right now. I watch a lot of television. And I always see this in these shows I watch sometimes. Some character counts on the basic goodness of man to win the victory. It's like there's some crisis happening and it's like, it's okay because mankind will rise to the event because we're good and our goodness will eventually show itself and we will overcome this crisis and all this great stuff. It's a great story, makes for a good show. But in real life, that's a bad bet to make, folks. More often than not, you can count on mankind to make the wrong choice, not the right one, especially the majority. The majority is usually wrong. The majority is usually going in the wrong direction. For example, a while back, they took prayer out of schools, right? There's an example. And just in general, Our nation is getting further and further away from our Christian roots. Our nation, the United States of America, was founded to a large degree on Christianity and on Christian principles and on biblical ideas, and we get further and further away from that. And people today act like, oh, there's nothing to see there, just sweep that under the rug. That was, if you go read some of the founding fathers of our country and the stuff they said in their speeches, they sounded like preachers. They sounded like they were preaching from the Bible half the time. It's really amazing when you think about it, but we've gotten further and further away from it. Now, supposedly, good people have come up with these ideas. But these are not good things. Why? Why? Because people, especially apart from a true relationship with God, will normally lead us further and further away from Him. And we need to be aware of that, folks. That's why we need this. We need the book. We need the written words on the paper that God left for us. Because if we just follow the whims of this group or that trend or this cultural idea or whatever, it will normally lead us away from a true and genuine knowledge of God. We need the book. We need to stay in the Word. All right, so I sense a but pastor here, okay? And I know this kind of a question, if you're looking for complete and total satisfaction, like I want to be totally satisfied, why do good things happen to good people? I can't promise you you're going to get that. I really can't. So I feel your pain. I know my grandma, at least it's hard for me to think of my grandma as an evil person, okay? She was just such a pinnacle of goodness in my mind. I'm not even sure I can think of her as a sinner, but I know, because the book told me, she was. She was one of those sinners, just like I am. She did not deserve to spend her later years the way she did. She spent her adult life doing nothing but taking care of her family, toiling, showing love to her grandchildren. But she was, in fact, a sinner, as am I. The amazing thing, folks, isn't that bad things happen to any of us. The amazing thing is that God puts up with the human race at all. Honestly. Let me add something to that. The amazing thing is that God so loved the world, that's us, that's sinners, that He gave His only Son for our salvation. That's the real amazing thing. Still, what is the point of believing, right? Like, what is the point of believing if even believers, even people who love God that walk with Him faithfully, are subject to these trials and these hardships in this life, then what's the point of following Him? What's the point of living for God? If the world is broken, if the human race is not really good, then where does this leave us? So I want to leave you with a third point of contact. I call it the future reversal for the faithful. So, point of contact 1 was the fact of a broken world. Number 2 was the fallacy of human goodness. Number 3, the future reversal for the faithful. The injustice of this world will not last forever. We do pray for those who are suffering for no fault of their own. And we have seen the Lord mercifully relieving that suffering for many, even here and now. And we thank God for that. That often does happen. But beyond this, we have the assurance that the disorder and injustice of this sinful world will be completely and totally reversed one day. Consider the parable of the rich man and Lazarus. We see this reversal taking place in very dramatic form there when Jesus told this story. I'll read Luke 16, verses 19 through 25. Going to kind of stop in the middle, but just for the sake of time, that's what I'll do. Jesus told this parable. He said, "Now there was a rich man, and he habitually dressed in purple and fine linen, enjoying himself in splendor every day. And a poor man named Lazarus was laid at his gate, covered with sores, and longing to be fed from the scraps which fell from the rich man's table. And not only that, the dogs also were coming and licking his sores. Now it happened that the poor man died and was carried away by the angels to Abraham's arms." Just think heaven. He went to heaven, okay? "And the rich man also died and was buried. And in Hades he raised his eyes, being in torment, and he saw Abraham far away and Lazarus in his arms. And he cried out and said, Father Abraham, have mercy on me, and send Lazarus so that he may dip the tip of his finger in water and cool off my tongue, for I am in agony in this flame. But Abraham said, Child, remember that during your life you received your good things, and likewise Lazarus bad things. But now he is being comforted here, and you are in agony. Now just a quick point. The rich man was not in hell just because he was rich. The rich man was in hell because he didn't believe. That's what makes you go to heaven or hell. It's based on whether you believe or not. And that was demonstrated in his life because he had this poor man at his gate day in and day out, and he would sit there and eat these big meals, and he would sit there in all this luxury and just enjoying himself, enjoying all of his riches, and he would let this poor guy covered in sores just rot at his gate day after day. That shows that he didn't believe. That shows that he didn't really have faith in God, because true faith in God shows itself. A truly faithful person would say, hey, let's at least give Lazarus some food. Let's give him a place to lay his head at night. Let's give him some help. So just a quick note so you understand that. But we see this reversal. In life, the rich man had all these riches and all this stuff, and he was living in the lap of luxury. And Lazarus, the implication is that Lazarus was a believer, was struggling all his life. But once they died, the roles were reversed. So there is a future reversal for the faithful, is what I'm getting at. Also consider Romans 8:18. A few minutes ago I read Romans 8:19 through 23, I think it was. I left out verse 18 because I wanted to bring it up here. Listen to this. This is very good. Paul writes, says, For I consider that the sufferings of this present time, meaning now, where we are today, this world we live in right now, I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory that is to be revealed to us. Maybe you know someone, maybe you have a loved one, maybe you yourself are suffering some horrible, debilitating disease. You're suffering for no reason, it seems like, and you just it just overwhelms you with grief and with confusion. You just don't understand why. You're always asking, why is this happening? Why is this happening? Well, understand that Paul says, as hard as that suffering might be, what awaits us, you can't even compare to that. It's not like they're equal. It's like the glory, the blessing, the joy, the fulfillment that we will find in heaven just totally outstrips any suffering and hardship that we face in this life. That is a promise from God, and that is what He is telling us to focus on, to have faith, to realize that one day this mess is going to be all cleaned up. It's going to be all over with. Yes, we face a reality in which good people often suffer. We're perplexed when we see evil people living like kings, free of trouble. But this reality will be replaced by a better one. Let me close with Jesus' words in John 16:33. He was at the Last Supper at this time. This was really just maybe a few hours before He was arrested and then crucified for us. But He said these words to them. He was trying to comfort them and telling them, He was telling them, I'm leaving. I'm going. They didn't understand exactly what He meant. They were about to, though. But He said these words. He says, These things I have spoken to you so that you may have peace. In the world you have tribulation, but take courage, I have overcome the world. Now, what does tribulation mean? It means trouble. It means hardship. It means hard times. It means there will be sufferings. There will be hard things that happen. And don't get me wrong, folks, there's a lot of joy and wonderful things in life as well. But every single one of us knows that we have had to face hardship at times. Contrary to popular belief, Jesus did not promise a life free of troubles this side of eternity. Okay, you know that there is the health and wealth gospel out there. People say, if you just trust in Jesus and send me a bunch of money, your life is going to be perfect. You're going to have riches beyond measure. You're going to have health. You're guaranteed to be healthy. And then when it doesn't happen, it's, well, you just didn't have enough faith. I'd be careful with that, folks. I'd be really careful with that. That's really just a bunch of garbage, honestly. Jesus did not promise a life free of troubles this side of eternity. What He did promise, though, and this is important, is that we would have spiritual peace in the midst of the troubles. And that's huge. If you've gone through a heavy struggle or a bad time and you have held on to your faith during that time, and maybe you were to the point where that's all you had. All you had was faith. All you had was, you know what? Everything in my life is falling apart, but I still have Jesus Christ. And He gave you that peace that you needed. Doesn't necessarily mean everything just gets easy, but it does mean you have a strength inside of you that you would not have without Him. A strength to persevere through any trial. I like to look at it this way. It's kind of like God will turn you into a hot knife, and that trouble, whatever it is, will become like butter. And you'll go right through it. You'll go right through it. You'll cut right through it. So He will give you peace in the midst of your troubles. The fact of a broken world, the fallacy of human goodness, and the future reversal for the faithful. Worship team, I'm going to invite you to come back up.